because the passions of men will not conform to the dictates of reason and justice without constraint. Because of the constraint that the Constitution places on our government, the people have a mechanism to check it. We agree with Thomas Jefferson's statement that though its ever-evolving interpretation and amendments, a written Constitution's text may rally and recall those who are watchful.
Constitutions may be violated in moments of passion or delusion. Depending on one's interpretation of the Constitution, these violations occur more frequently than not. A pure textualist would hypothetically argue that judicial review, not explicitly granted to the Supreme Court in Article 3, is inherently unconstitutional on the basis that what the Constitution does not permit, it prohibits. However, an originalist would use Federal 78 to argue that the founders intended for the Supreme Court to strike down laws they deem unconstitutional.
In a moment of passion, Congress violated the Constitution with the gag rule in 1831, which automatically tabled all petitions regarding slavery. James Madison opposed the gag rule, stating it was a direct violation of the First Amendment's provision to petition the government for a redress of grievances. The resolution was repealed 7 years later.
Wartime has been consistently used throughout history to justify controversial actions taken by government, spanning from Lincoln's suspension of habeas corpus to the Supreme Court ruling in Korematsu versus United States. As a part of the Bush administration's war on terror, the prison camp at Guantanamo Bay was created in a moment of delusion to ensure security of our nation. The prison not only strips detainees of the right of habeas corpus in Article 1, Section 9, but is also known for its enhanced interrogation techniques, deemed in violation of the Eighth Amendment and the treaties of the 1949 Geneva Convention. After the Supreme Court ruled the Military Commission Act unconstitutional in Boumediene versus Bush, Justice Anthony Kennedy declared, "The laws and Constitution are designed to survive and remain in force in extraordinary times."
We agree that the people can rally to fix their political creed. Through the impeachment process outlined under Article 2, Section 4, the right to freedom of assembly, and the amendment process, the people are able to create and keep the government they desire.
In 2015, Senator Bernie Sanders proposed the Senate Joint Resolution 4 to restore the rights taken in the Supreme Court decision, Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission. The proposed constitutional amendment would protect the integrity of our elections, but it can't be passed without pressure from voters.
Amendments have previously been ratified in response to unpopular Supreme Court decisions. The fight for the 19th Amendment was a reaction to the Supreme Court decision in Minor v. Halverset, which did not give women the right to vote under the Equal Protection Clause. The women suffragists demonstrated their First Amendment right of freedom of assembly as a catalyst to gaining the right to vote.
No amendment has been added to our Constitution for 24 years, but it is more important than ever that citizens understand the process. Ratification of an amendment must occur in some reasonable time after the proposal, but in the 18th, 20th, 21st, and 22nd Amendments, Congress set that reasonable time to 7 years.
Depending on who is elected as 45th President of the United States, we may be in for a set of constitutional violations mirroring the past. GOP frontrunner Donald Trump has continuously turned public sentiment against the media. He's even promised to open up libel laws. This is a direct violation of the First Amendment and parallels John Adams' Alien and Sedition Acts. Additionally, presidential candidate Bernie Sanders has promised to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. If successful, he would be in direct violation of Congress's constitutional power to regulate the federal minimum wage under the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938.
As Benjamin Franklin wrote in a letter in 1755, they who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Our Constitution provides the framework that can protect rights for centuries to come, but if fanciful passions guide us down a slippery slope of constitutional violations, our essential liberties are lost. Thank you.
412.
If you could modernize or update the Constitution in some particular way, how would you do that and why?
I would definitely clarify the Second Amendment, as we see it's a acute controversy today. We don't really understand if the founders intended for us to just be talking about a militia bearing arms, or if they talked both about a militia and the people of the United States able to bear arms. And if that could be clarified, that would quell a lot of conflicts we see today.
I would support an amendment that would give an explicit right to vote. Although the Supreme Court did rule that the districts in Texas and Evan v. Abbott should be based on total population rather than eligible voters, by giving a positive right in our Constitution, it makes it all the more harder for our government to take away a liberty that is so fundamental in our democracy.
I would add an article or a section off of that amendment that gave legal residents the right to vote. You can see that in San Francisco there was a movement to have this right to vote for legal residents, especially in school elections, school board elections that have a direct effect on legal residents' children's lives. And so we can see that this would have a positive impact on our society, and legal residents would have more say in local level issues.
Additionally, I would further clarify and expand the 14th Amendment to further protect rights within the LGBT community. According to the Equal Rights Campaign, almost half of the states within the United States have no form of anti-discrimination laws within the workplace. So I would like for states to have some sort of compelling state interest for discrimination within the workplace.
Do the American people today revere and respect the Constitution and the concept of constitutionalism in a way that the framers intended them to?
I think there's a difference between respecting the Constitution and thinking that you have to live by the exact text, every word of the Constitution. And there's a difference between, using what the founders created as a starting off point to protect rights and to allow government to organize law in a meaningful way for citizens. And a lot of originalists think that they are the only ones who are actually protecting the true meaning of the Constitution, when in fact the true meaning of the Constitution is to be a living document and to expand and protect rights for centuries.
I think that respect for the Constitution has a lot to do with partisanship today. You can see that with President Obama's nomination of Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court. Republicans tend to feel that Senate should not vote and not fulfill their constitutional duty to hold a hearing for Merrick Garland. And Democrats feel that this is absolutely necessary, but we can see that because the president is considered a liberal, Republicans would want the Constitution to be interpreted in a certain way versus Republicans today.
The founders would not agree with a strict textualist interpretation of the Constitution. They made many things within the Constitution very vague. One of these would be the 9th Amendment, because they knew that social norms and technology would be constantly changing and expanding, going past things that they could ever imagine.
What place does civil disobedience have in a constitutional government?
You can see that our Constitution gives way for civil disobedience through Article 1, right to assembly and right of speech. And what?
First Amendment.
First Amendment. Sorry. I lost my train of thought.
Additionally, citizens can exercise their duties as citizens and join NGOs to further make their voices heard. They can file amicus briefs and push for change starting at a state level.
Martin Luther King Jr. advocated civil disobedience in a constitutional democracy only if the laws themselves were unjust, and that you were doing a duty to your government to disobey those laws in a peaceful way, following the steps of satyagraha as outlined by Gandhi. And so through those means, in a constitutional democracy, civil disobedience can function and be successful.
In addition to what Alex has said, I think the ideas of satyagraha and the peaceful steps towards disobedience can be paralleled with our amendment process. If we are upset with something that's going on, we can peacefully try and change what's going on by issuing or advocating for a new amendment to our Constitution.
Was Thomas Jefferson, when he wrote this quote, was Thomas Jefferson actually advocating departing from the Constitution, or was he just simply saying, when people do, the Constitution will bring them back?
I think he was saying when they do, the Constitution will bring people back, because though he is looked at as a pretty strict constructionist, to many scholars today, he actually, 1 year later after he said this, he violated the Constitution during the Louisiana Purchase, which was really a struggle for him, but he decided that it was necessary for the United States to purchase the Louisiana Territory. It was going to benefit the country immensely, and so he did actually, despite being this really strong advocate for following the Constitution exactly, and he hated Alexander Hamilton's bank, National Bank idea because of that, where the lines, he has this strict idea of where the Constitution lies, and he himself violated it, so I guess it must have brought him back at the end.
So Jefferson didn't like the ATM fees at Alexander Hamilton Bank.
You, man, go to bank now.
Right. He's going with credit union now.
In light of the acrimony in our time, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I
Yeah.
didn't.
Sorry. Okay. Okay. Feedback.
You guys did a great job in the testimony, but the one thing that I would say, and I said this to a prior group, is that the question is really clear in what it calls for. The call to question is, do you agree or disagree, and why or why not? And you get to that, but you got to it so far in the testimony that I actually had written on here to give you that. So you may want to make that more clear earlier on, so that the judges are sitting there thinking, okay, so what is their position on the question, because they don't know. I liked the use of some of the more, like the very current event type situations in terms of the violations that are coming, just based on what's being said by the candidates and things of that nature. I think I've actually asked you the question before of how you would amend the Constitution. You guys had good answers, but you guys all sat there kind of like, oh God, what's the answer? I think that's the kind of question we were likely to get. Something that's going to be really evoking of that kind of stuff. So try to have like really clear answers as best as you can to sort of the softball questions, because you probably are going to get at least one of those. So.
Yeah, I mean, I thought you guys did a good job, and you had pretty good participation among you guys. You guys tell me if I'm wrong, but I think in your presentation, I heard you call Guantanamo Bay, as you referred to it, as a violation of the Constitution in a moment of delusion. I would just maybe be careful with that and think a little bit more about that. I mean, national security is an important issue, and I don't know that it can necessarily be categorized as a delusion. I'm not saying you guys are wrong, but you just want to maybe give that a
We
little
should just say
bit
it's
more thought.
controversial.
Well, we were trying to say, because we were trying to tie it back to the text of the question, because it says maybe violated in moments of passion or delusion. So like, your view is intended by your fear of.
I think because I actually remember looking over at Brandon kind of when you said this, it was that I think the way that it was phrased is that in a way, and I know this is not what you meant, but I know that somebody could construe it as that national security itself was a little delusional. And that's, I know not what I know that's not what you're trying to say, but yeah.
I think also what we're trying to say is we had the delusion that we were going to gain a lot of information from Guantanamo Bay, which we didn't, so I guess we could put it down a little bit.
I would, you know what, I would go further back in the process and just talk about just the genesis of a lot of our counterterrorism policy was a response to some popular delusion, I mean, you guys were like, I can't believe I'm saying this, you guys were like 3 at the time, like 9/11. But I remember like all the,
Forget that.
I know,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah, it's bizarre. They barely remember the 90s, if at all, it's crazy. The anthrax scare that followed it, people were mailing like packets of envelopes full of sugar that are supposed to resemble anthrax, people went shit crazy for about 2 or 3 years, and even a little bit beyond that. So I would tie it more directly to that, because first of all, Guantanamo Bay, that base has existed since the revolution in the late 50s. That base has been there forever. It's just that they decided to use it as a, it was like a halfway house for people for enemy combatants.
Well, and the other thing about that is it's a pretty complicated issue, because I think you have to ask yourself, like, was the Constitution really violated? And it brings up the issue of whether enemy combatants, you know, are individuals who are subjected to the rights guaranteed by our Constitution.
And what Supreme Court case would you use to say that they are?
No, that would go against it.
Not Korematsu would not help you there. Boumediene v. Bush.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about, you know, and the enforcement of Common Article 3 from Geneva Conventions and from Hamdan v.
And you also talk about how like the text of the 14th Amendment states that all persons.
How you use that? That's where, yeah. So you gotta clarify that because there are a
That's
lot
what
of people.
Boeing v. Bush used.
Right, maybe as well. But you've gotta clarify that because what, you know, if you're gonna make that argument, you're gonna get people to pounce on you and say, look, national security is obviously, I mean, it is a much more complicated issue than either the left or right makes it. So you have to have profound, you know, if you're basically arguing that we need to adhere to the Constitution, you know, how to meet it.
So wait, does it say passions or delusions in the quote, in the text of the quote?
Yes.
Just change that to passions instead of like in a moment of delusion they opened up Guantanamo Bay, should be like
I
a
think-
moment of passion following 9/11.
Yeah,
I like
that
that
would be better. I still like what he said about the
Oh, no, I agree.
popular delusion.
Yeah, there was some
Yeah.
popular delusion, but yeah, it's hard for me to imagine Dick Cheney having any passion one way or the other.
Oh, I think he does. It's not my
I
take.
mean,
Passion
delusion, yeah, I think,
in
I think
prison
he's
was
kind of
very-
robotic, you know. Really quickly, is the Constitution a suicide pact? Abraham Lincoln, when he suspended habeas corpus, because had he violated the Constitution to save the Union, because if he had let Maryland slip, Union gone, the Confederacy would have surrounded the Capitol. It would have been done. The Civil War would have been over in a week. So you think about it, you know, maybe there are times in which, you know, the higher law, it's unjust to the people to even adhere to certain forms of norms of the Constitution where it actually does protect the rights of the people to continue as Americans, right? The question I asked you about the Constitution today, what I would focus on there, and you guys kind of took it in the strict constructionist, and I guess my question may have sounded like I was going there. I was kind of going more for, you know, do people today even really, when they consider what policies that they want to have enacted, does the Constitution even factor in? And for a lot of people, I would say, no, it doesn't. They just say, I like this. This is good. Oh, open up libel laws. Okay, absolutely. Ban Muslims. Yeah. Constitution doesn't factor in there. I would argue that a lot of people don't even consider it. It doesn't even cross their mind. Constitution, it's just a thing.
How do you back that up though? I feel like that's just too much.
Public opinion polls. I would say. Yeah, and I would just say what some of the candidates say.
Okay.
That's how I would back it up.
Can I add some stuff?
Yes, you can.
Depends.
It's a little bit,
How long is it?
but like,
Well, you're
Just
prolonging it now.
so, in a 1785 letter to James Madison, Thomas Jefferson wrote that a constitution should die every 19 years and it should be rewritten.
Yeah, we had it, our last testimony was on that quote.
Yeah, so, cross-ex, I felt like somebody could have come up with that and disagreed with one another, and it would have been.
Dude, Thomas Jefferson.
Jefferson thought about that.
More
That's